Joining me now for more on this is Amin Saikal to talk about the Iran situation in particular. Amin, thanks very much for your time today. I want to start with the protests around Iran at the moment to do with this situation. Protesting, of course, in part what they say is the cover-up from their government. Is tension ratcheting up within Iran?
Yes, it is, and I think there's many Iranians who are very much angry about what has transpired. Of course, they have seriously objected to the government that they did not come out immediately to acknowledge that it was the Iranian forces that shot down the plane. And also, of course, this has provided an opportunity for many Iranians to reflect their grievances against the government, which sort of runs deep, because the economic situation is really bad in Iran. I mean, the sanctions have really affected the overall situation and the standard of living for a majority of the Iranian public.
So you mentioned the economic situations, the sanctions are biting. There is also, I guess, the more educated class that are not happy with the country's direction. Do you think there's a strong likelihood of the regime seriously imperiled here or not?
I don't expect a regime fall in Iran, because the regime is quite really well entrenched, and it is in charge or in command of all the coercive forces, as well as still commands the support of a good segment of the Iranian public, particularly from the rural area. And what the United States has been doing is also invoking that very traditional sense of fierce nationalism on the part of the Iranians. So at the moment, the anger is not just against the Iranian government, but also against the United States. Of course, the government would heavily draw on this in order to shore up its position that, whatever is really happening in Iran is primarily the fault of the United States.
And we've seen as well, when the US has, I guess, sometimes barracked for, sometimes helped advocate for regime change, the result perhaps is not what people were expecting. I understand you say you don't think it's likely, but if we did see regime change down the track, what would it look like in Iran?
Well, I mean, I think it could be very chaotic, because the current regime has wiped out any possible alternative, and who is really likely to emerge in order to take over power. I think that is going to be the big question. Of course, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard is the strongest force, and may well really take over power, in which case you're going to see a military dictatorship in Iran, which would probably would be worse than the current regime, which is in power. And also President Trump keeps sending tweets in support of the Iranian protesters. Really doesn't help the situation, because basically plays into the hands of the Iranian authorities to say that whatever the protests are taking place in Iran are very much inspired and supported by outside forces.
For all the talk of escalating tensions and, when things briefly reached that sort of height, I guess, a plane being shot out of the air, and concern about what it would lead to, it seems, that neither side here wants a full-blown conflict. Would you agree?
Well, I totally agree with that. I think both sides want to really avoid full-blown war, and that's why the Iranians' response to the American killing of General Soleimani was very measured, and they had made sure that there would be no American fatalities, and therefore that would not really prompt President Trump to retaliate. But at the same time, the very factors which underpin the hostilities between Iran and the United States still remain there, and therefore there's always a chance of further flare-ups and the possibility of a major confrontation between the two sides. But for the time being, it looks like that there is a respite.
Donald Trump is talking about maybe a new nuclear deal. Is him trying to make sure the old one's dead? Do you think there's genuine appetite from him to get a new deal? And how would other countries such as China help facilitate that?
I think the other signatories to the nuclear agreement of July 2015 may well really support a possible renegotiation of that agreement, but whether the Iranian side would really be in a position to go as far as to renegotiate the entire agreement without first the Americans making certain concessions. I think the Iranian leadership has indicated that if the United States lifts some of the sanctions, then that will open the way for negotiations, but so far President Trump and his administration have not really budged on the sanctions.
So you think there'd have to be a partial lifting of sanctions before Iran even goes to the negotiation table? They need that goodwill gesture, which seems pretty unlikely from Donald Trump?
I think so, and that will provide a positive narrative to particularly moderate forces in Iranian politics to advocate the opening of dialogue with the United States, and that is a possibility. But if the United States continue to persist with its maximum policy of maximum pressure, then I think the chances at this point that the Iranians coming forward to open dialogue with the United States, to me, seem very limited.
That seems a pretty safe prediction at the moment, albeit in a very unpredictable area. Amin Saikal, appreciate your time today. Thank you.